We're going to now hear from Dana Kirkham, who runs Redi, which is a local regional economic development organization here in eastern Idaho. I know Dana has presented in front of the Line Commission before, and I just want to take a minute to thank Dana for all of her efforts. Sadly, this will be the last time that Dana presents to us in this realm representing Redi, so she will be moving on to different things the end of June, but I know I speak on behalf of everyone in this room. Thank you for everything you've done and all of your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby Joe. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much. I am definitely your non-technical support today, so hopefully we're all speaking the same language. I appreciate the invitation to come and present. This really came out of, I had a conversation with Dr. Peters and came out of our conversation in January at Line Commission when John Kotek and I presented, and just maybe talking a little bit more about the specifics of how we build awareness around the nuclear industry and particularly around energy. So if you'll humor me a little bit, I want to talk about some economies that are quite different than ours, and I would certainly never suggest that our economies should become like the ones that I'm going to talk about, but I would say that there are still some things that we could learn from these economies. So I looked back over the last decade and looked at which economies consistently fall in the top 10 for the fastest growing economies in the United States. And so I'm going to focus on 4 of these, not a lot, but I just want to maybe point out some things about them and then apply that to our own economy, not just in eastern Idaho, but really across the state of Idaho. So first, we'll start with San Jose, the San Jose area. This is, of course, part of the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay area that has seen a real boom over the last 20 years. And San Jose most recently has seen that growth. And they, of course, are benefiting from the tech industry in that area. They also have the advantage of having Stanford University and Cal Berkeley, who pipes out every year. They have thousands of engineers that come back into this local economy. And so that's a big boost for them because of their synergy between their academic institutions and the industry that is thriving there. Austin, Round Rock, Texas. So interestingly enough, we know Texas for oil and gas, and Austin has actually benefited from this in the support sense. So they are the tech support for most of the gas industry and oil industry in Texas. They also have the University of Texas in their midst that last year alone sponsored over 6,000 projects related to the gas and oil industry, as well as over the last decade, they have had 65 companies that came out of entrepreneurs that were students at the University of Texas, and 50 of those companies have stayed in the Texas area. Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, Colorado. So I always like to look at them because honestly their economy is somewhat similar to the Idaho economy. And a lot of their boom came out of DoD and their presence in Aurora. So I think there's a real strong connection between the Idaho National Laboratory's presence in Idaho and the potential for eastern Idaho and ultimately for the state of Idaho. They also have Colorado College of Mines, which of course is an engineering and applied science university that has absolutely bolstered this economy as well. Boston, Cambridge, Newton. So this area, of course, is known for R&D. There are over 1,000 R&D centers in the Boston area, 1/3 of all of the nation's R&D center in the Boston area. So that's really interesting because I think when you think of Boston, you don't necessarily think of that, but as a result, and of course they have MIT and Harvard there, which help with that as well. But when you think about this, you don't necessarily think about R&D, but really they are the driver for R&D throughout the whole nation, and as a result have a presence of companies from Apple to IBM to HP, you name it, they're in that area. All right, so what's the point? The point is when you look at all of these economies, what they have in common is that they have one strong economic driver that's easily identified. So Texas and oil, you have Colorado and aerospace, you have San Francisco, San Jose, and tech. So I would say that it's time for eastern Idaho and Idaho to get specific. And if I've learned anything in this job over the last couple of years, it's that that's the one thing that's holding us back, is that we're trying to be all things to all people. And it's time to decide who we really are, to grow up and grow into that. And I would even go so far as to say that we should be making the case that Idaho is the state where energy begins or happens, or there's people that can come up with the slogan better than me, but that energy should really be our focus. And so I'd say that because let's just look at a few, just a few facts. So this was actually produced by the Federal Energy Information Association, which comes out of DOE's contract. So this is charting energy and what is used, the energy sources that produce electricity across the nation over the last 16 years. So you can see that coal, of course, is on the decline. You can see that natural gas, like Bear just talked about, is on the upswing, obviously because of the cost associated with it. Nuclear, of course, hovers right in there, right? Pretty consistent. And it's not necessarily because nuclear can't produce more. It's really regulatory, right? You don't just build a nuclear plant tomorrow and say, oh, I want to do that. It doesn't really work that way. But then it's the bottom line that I really want to look at. It's always the bottom line, right? That's always what's most important. So it's renewables. We see that renewables are on the upswing. And that's because as they are developed and discovered, they're becoming implemented more and more as we move toward this ideal of being carbon-free. So this is really interesting because Idaho, what don't we have? We don't have fossil fuel. So we have always been on the forefront of renewables. Let's just look at a few facts. So we have biomass, we have geothermal, we have hydro, we have solar, we have wind, we have nuclear. There aren't many states that can say they have this package, that they have it all combined. 82% of the electricity that was produced in the state of Idaho was produced from renewable energy. Of course, 60% of that is hydro, and that's where we get to that high. But that puts us actually second only to Vermont in the whole nation. So you can see we're right there at the forefront of renewable energy. And we are one of the lowest users of natural gas. Despite the fact that 53% of our homes have natural gas, we're in the bottom third of the nation for natural gas consumption. And even though 82% of the electricity that's produced in the state of Idaho, we have the 6th lowest electricity costs in the nation. So we're right there. We're right in a place to tell this story and to tell it really well. So like I said, we need to be the place, and probably what we have a vacuum of more than anything else in this area, and this is what Dr. Peters and I talked about, is leadership. And this is the group to provide that leadership and to really say this is what Idaho should be focused on. And I always think back on Henry Ford's, one of his most famous quotes, that if I'd asked the people what they wanted, they would have told me faster horses. So sometimes you have to show people, you have to be the vision to help them understand what you can become. So how do we do this? What's the nuts and bolts? Well, first of all, we need to own our history. And that, particular to this group, we need to own our nuclear history. And sometimes because of the controversy associated with nuclear, we don't always give it the credit that it deserves, particularly in our state. So I would just remind you, as you all know, atoms for peace, atomic energy first used to produce electricity right here in Idaho, in ARCO, when we lit ARCO. We also have built and operated 52 reactors. Idaho National Laboratory gets credit for that. We also are on the forefront, and we're the ones who developed and tested the nuclear energy used to power our nuclear subfleet. So we have a rich history when it comes to nuclear, and we need to not be ashamed or afraid to talk about it. We also need to do a better job helping our constituency understand not just our nuclear history, but our history with regard to energy. And then we need to make a plan. And that plan, maybe Redi's the driver for that, but someone needs to be the convener that brings everybody to the table. And when I say everybody, I mean the stakeholders, I mean the educational facilities, I mean the industry, I mean the public at large. Bring people to the table and come up with an actual business plan that says, if we are going to talk to the external audience about what Eastern Idaho and Idaho has to offer, this is what it is. Get everybody on the same page. Say, this is why if we're going to build a network economy, like these other economies that I just showed, and we're going to have an ecosystem that supports the energy industry, this is what we have to offer. This is what it looks like. This is how you operate in our area. And then we need to go out and sell the plan. And selling the plan is complicated because it also includes pulling together really a database of every company globally that would play in the supply chain. And that's the supply chain not just for the SMR and for the microreactor, but for all things renewable. And that database, then you need an organization, all your economic development organizations that would go out and actually sell that to those companies. Say, have you ever thought about locating in Idaho? Because we have all of this to offer. And of course, the National Laboratory is a big piece of that. Then we need to bring the internal audience online, and that's already happening. So I talked to you about this in January, and I just reiterated again that we have a group here in Eastern Idaho, ETEG, Energy Technology Environment Group, and they are already out making the rounds, talking to all of the local city councils and helping them understand our history, helping them understand what's happening at the National Laboratory, helping them understand what's happening with the cleanup project and NRF. And so that's a great thing that we started. They'll also be talking to Rotary. So that's a way to start the internal audience, but it needs to go beyond Eastern Idaho. And like I said in January, as you move further away from Idaho Falls, the less interest and understanding there is about what's happening in our backyard. So that means we haven't done a good job telling our story, and we need to do a better job of it. And then we need to build the workforce. So we have, out of this line commission, you have the Education Workforce Subcommittee, and they've done a great job making a start at this. So they have identified and inventoried what programs each of our universities has to offer with regard to the nuclear industry. But now we need to kind of inject that plan with steroids, right? So we need to say, okay, that's great, but we need to connect academia with the private sector and with the public sector in this form of National Laboratory and say, are we actually turning out, even we have these programs, but are these the programs that are needed, that are necessary, and that are meeting the mark? Are you hiring our graduates? And if you're not hiring them, why aren't you hiring them? We need to have that really important conversation. And then we need to use our academic assets. And what I mean by that, not the institutions, but the kids that go to the institutions. So we have 50,000 students in Eastern Idaho during any semester, and they should be telling this story. They should be enrolled in our STEM programs because they should be phenomenal. And I'm going to show you a video that kind of exemplifies what I'm talking about. Now, this video comes out of MIT, and you're going to say, well, it's MIT. And I'm going to say, well, let's listen. If you think that it's MIT and U of I and ISU and BSU can't be that, then you're missing the point, right? The picture is we could be that. I mean, the point is we could be that. We could do that if we really had the vision and started to think bigger, and not in just this myopic way of saying, we have X number of jobs coming online, how do we fill them? We should be influencing the energy conversation across the nation. We should be who people are looking to explain energy policy because we've actually applied it here. So let me show you this video. Maybe. That's a bit anticlimactic, isn't it? We just tried it. Technical. Coming. We did just try it. Let's see, it's paused.
It's kind of funny that a lot of people don't even know that this is here. They'll say, there's a nuclear reactor on campus. I'm like, have you never noticed the blue dome with the brick chimney? And they're like, oh, that's what that is? It looks like a water tank, but it's not a tank of water, it's a tank of science.
You can see behind us, there's some stuff coming out. We just want to clarify it. That's not smoke, it's not radioactive.
It's water vapor, and it's totally safe for the environment, and it's just how they cool the reactor.
I'm a sixth-year now PhD candidate. I work here on Albany Street in a bunch of the labs we're going to be seeing.
And I'm a fifth-year grad student. I work in a lot of the same labs as Brandon and a few different ones.
After you. I think the overarching goal of a lot of the labs on Albany Street is climate change and attacking it in different ways.
We need to understand more about the energy we're using, because like we're going to get to a point where we don't have energy anymore, and that is a problem. The easy thing to do to create energy was to burn things with fire. That was easy, but it turns out burning things isn't the ideal way to get electricity on the grid. So we've done that. We did the easy thing, and now we need to do the hard thing.
We're going to see the fission reactor, then we're going to go on to an accelerator lab. We're going to see lasers, electron microscopes, nanoparticle labs.
Bubbles.
We're going to see a fusion experiment.
Plasma experiments.
Corrosion labs.
Lots of magnets.
Like any cool science word you can think of, like we have it on the street.
Down to the basement labs.
Where the real fun is. We both study fusion energy.
Fusion is really cool because it could be a baseload form of power, and the fuel source you can get from water, like from seawater. So we have literally millions of years worth of fuel if we can get fusion to work.
One of the things that really gets me excited about fusion and fission and nuclear energy in general is the forms of energy we use now are breaking chemical bonds. Nuclear energy is kind of like the next step forward in technology because we're breaking atomic bonds and reforming atomic bonds, and it's really the next step forward for society and science.
So this goes on for another couple minutes. We don't have time for that. But my point is this. Do you see how they're telling the story better than we can tell the story? And this is an industry that is aging. I mean, with all due respect, I'm aging, so I feel like I can say that. But I feel like we have these students who are really not engaged in the programs like they should be. And even if they're engaged in it, we don't have the synergy where they're going out and telling the story with regard to energy and Idaho. And that's what we need to have happen. And somehow we have to bring academia in to understand that they're a key player in us being successful economically because of the asset that we have in our own backyard with regard to energy. So my big ask would be that this group would also consider the idea that Eastern Idaho be actually dubbed the energy corridor of Idaho. And in large part because of the assets we have with the National Laboratory and with NRF. And that would be a great jumping off point if that was officially stated for us to start pulling the rest of this plan together. And as they said in the video, you know, we've done the easy thing, now we have to do the hard thing. And the great thing about Eastern Idaho and Idahoans is we're not afraid of hard. We do it really well. So I'll open for questions.
Thanks. Any questions? Oh, Director Tippett?
Thanks, Madam Chairman, and Dana, really interesting, thank you. One of your slides indicated that 82%, I think, of the power that's generated in Idaho is from renewable sources. I know that we don't have any coal-fired power plants in the state of Idaho, but I know that we import power from coal-fired power plants in other states. Do you happen to know, and maybe you don't, but wondered if you knew what percentage of the power that's actually consumed in Idaho is renewable as opposed to the power that's generated in Idaho?
Yeah. Remember when I told you I'm your non-technical support?
So I'm gonna check real quick with John Chatburn and see if he knows. I thought maybe he would.
Well, I'd have to find my slideshow, Director Tippett, but when you look at EIA data, one of the interesting things is that quite a bit of the electricity that's generated in Idaho is not consumed in Idaho.
Right.
As an example, the output from Lucky Peak goes to Seattle City Light.
Okay.
Our electricity mix for the state is getting more clean, if you will, by the year. Idaho Power is up to about, given the water year, somewhere around 75% clean energy now. The issue we have with when you can't really break it out because Pacific Core won't tell anybody what Rocky Mountain Power's actual mix is. They do their blend for their fuel mix across the entire 6-state footprint that they have. But Pacific Core is like 60% coal. So the energy we get in Idaho, in fact, I'll send you the figures in the morning.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, John. And thank you too, Dana.
Any other questions?
You're tired.
Thanks, Dana.